And welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for a new episode of Anewgo of New Home Sales. I'm your host, Anya Chrysanthemum, and joining me today is Jennifer Cooper with Evolution Marketing. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Anya.
I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Yes.
So, Jennifer, for those listeners who may not know who you are, can you please tell us your life story? Tell us your story of home building and how did you get to where you are now and what is it that you do?
Life story. That could take a while, but to shorten it up, I'm Jennifer Cooper. I've been in the industry for, probably in some about 13 years. I've been in marketing and advertising for about 23. So yeah, you can do the math on my age there. But I've worked for many home builders across the country, some national builders, some names you may know, Richmond American Homes, Oakwood Homes, Truland Homes in my more corporate marketing career. And throughout that, had the blessing and honor to work with great companies, great leaders, great team members. I did win National Marketing Professional of the Year once, and also as a runner-up the year after that. So that was a huge honor and obviously a compliment to the team and the people around me, because not one person can make great marketing by themselves. I've also been speaking at many of the popular national conferences across the country. And honestly, right after COVID, I decided to leave the corporate world and step out on my own for a while. It's something I've dabbled in on and off as being a mom. It's really hard to balance kids and life and career. So I decided to step back into it. And that's where I've been really for the last 3 years now.
So you describe yourself and your new role as fractional CMO. For those listeners who may not be familiar with what that definition means, can you give us your interpretation of what that means for you? And I'd love to have a discussion around fractional CMOs for our industry.
Yeah, it is a new and growing term. You'll hear fractional CRO, fractional CFO, and fractional CMO. It's an emerging term, emerging role. And I honestly contribute a lot of that to changing company dynamics and a lot post-pandemic, if you will. But in a nutshell, fractional CMO means what it sounds. You get someone's time a fraction of the time. So where companies may have a CMO or not, that role actually doesn't exist in a lot of builder organizations, some of the large ones, obviously. Smaller ones feel like they have leadership between vice presidents of sales and marketing, or they're just smaller and they don't have that role moving into the C-suite. Larger ones, you'll see that. So on the home building side, what I do is I come in and I work a fraction of the time. So I may work with a company 8 hours or 10 hours or 20 hours for some of my clients, and they get that executive leadership for a fraction of the time. So I come in and bring my experience, my expertise, my visionary skills, and really organizational skills and help either teams in place, or sometimes I'm their fill-in marketing person. So it really depends on the dynamic of the company. And sometimes we have long-lasting relationships. Two of my longest lasting wonderful partnerships are with Builders Design and Focus 360. I'm pretty transparent about that. I've been working with them for almost 3 years now, and I really consider myself part of their team in all senses of the description. I feel like I'm a team member of theirs, just as if I worked in their office. And then other companies will hire me for more of that fractional 3 month, 6 month, or 12-month type of relationships. That is what fractional is. And again, you'll see it across fractional, so a CRO or a CIO, CTO. Fractionals can be across really any of those roles when someone comes in and brings that expertise.
Mm-hmm. So you touched upon the different role in home building, because so many builders are obviously not huge builders, and they do maybe have the VP role or just a marketing coordinator. So in your opinion, the fractional role, does that apply to home building? Because the two clients that you mentioned, they are the, I guess we would say,
not home builders,
not builders, but in the home building industry, obviously.
Yeah, it works really well in the home building industry, actually, because again, sometimes you have younger, less experienced teams that are reporting up to people that have a lot on their plate, and maybe they're not having the opportunity to give them the leadership or the growth, or maybe themselves, they don't have the experience in marketing, but marketing was put on their plate as a senior leader and they're overseeing this team. And you have these marketing teams that are are machines. Anybody in marketing that's going to listen to this will know, yes, I'm a machine, I'm in marketing. And they're maybe not getting the support, the leadership, the guidance, the ideas, the creativity, because that person overseeing them, to no fault of their own, has a lot on their plate. So I find that a lot of people have reached out to me for mentorship, which is one of my favorite things to do. So coming in and saying, okay, how are you looking at campaigning? How are you looking at your brand? How are you looking at your messaging? Do you understand what your data is telling you? Biggest thing that we find is a miss. So I come in as a mentor and they're my mentee, and I teach them as much as I can in the runway that I'm given for that fractional relationship. So many times it works, and I can integrate in with various levels of leadership, and then various levels of leadership. Once I come in, they realize I have a whole host of experience across really the operational makeup of home building, that I start helping all the spokes in the wheel of the organization, because many times marketing touches every spoke in the organization. That's the part that I find a lot of joy and passion around in giving back to those organizations I work with.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, you touched upon working with the team. So talk to us about the difference of how do you approach working with an in-house team? Maybe they have a small marketing team or a coordinator, or versus an agency, or we see more and more that the home builders are starting to outsource those marketing roles. Talk about some of that.
I don't see any difference. For me personally, I always say when I come into an organization, either in my corporate life or my CMO life, where's my bench? I have to build my bench. So I have to understand who I'm working with and supporting me in tasks in-house and out of house. And many times it's a 50-50 split. So understanding the team at the agency, where their sweet spot is as well. Many times we'll find agencies that say, we do all of this. I'm going to find out you're really good at this. And then I may say, do we move things to other firms, or do we really rely heavily or more heavily on this one area that you do things really great? But those people are part of the team. I'm known for bringing everybody into monthly calls and really bringing them in as team members. So they're part of my bench. And so at the end of the day, I don't think of Joe, Sally, Sam over here, and you've got Michaela and David here. They're all my team. And I think that the psychology of that does not change anything. And they're all accountable. At the end of the day, my OSCs, my marketers, my agencies all need to know where sales are, where leads are, where our pain points are, and where people are getting hung up on home buying, because we're all working together to drive traffic. So that's really how I look at it.
So I think the rise of work from home has certainly helped the idea of having a fractional CMO. But for the teams, I assume that the teams that you work with, you are working remotely, right? You don't have an opportunity to necessarily be at 10 different places at the same time. So talk to me about integrating remotely into those teams.
Remote is the wave of the future, or hybrid. We've seen a lot of companies have embraced, there's something to being in person. And even that is the one thing that I sometimes struggle with. I think relationships are stronger when you have face-to-face. Sometimes just talking through concepts or talking through hard pain points for growth are much easier to have in person. So I do travel a lot. I do try to visit the teams that I support, and boots on the ground is absolutely phenomenal and needed to be a good marketer and a good visionary. But yeah, my former CMO role was building teams long distance. So doing a lot of this and a lot of video work is part of my everyday. But I literally work with companies across the country. So the hybrid thing is, I think we've all adjusted to it. It's made my opportunity for work much more open, since people are like, well, you travel and we can do teams, and this is a little bit of the new way of things. It works out well, and it really opens up the job pool for the other builders too. They're not just looking for someone maybe in their small area, or where it's different price points for different types of talent that you're going to find. You can really look across the country when you're looking at these fractional folks that can help you out. And so much of marketing is writing, it's content, it's data. So when we're really focused on the marketing at hand, we need to be in our computer. But when we do need to be in the field to look at signage strategies, to see the competition, to see how the lot feels, to see how community feels, being able to travel, I think is important, especially for CMOs and fractional CMOs in home building.
Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit more about benefits and maybe potential drawbacks that you've seen for this role in particular.
Yeah. So the benefits, it gives you a lot of flexibility to adjust your schedule as you need to as parents. It also gives you a ton of variety in your day-to-day, where personally, I need that. I've worked for the last 2 builders I worked for were integrated companies that had multiple brands. So I always in multiple regions. So I've always been a high performer and that I need to touch a lot of different things to keep my creative juices going. If you don't thrive in a lot of variety, this type of role probably isn't for you. But some of the drawbacks are I have like my office of me and my chief dog officer who sits behind my desk. Love him to death. And so you have that, you're alone a lot, but I have a family and I find other ways to stay socially connected. So that's for anybody though. That's not just unique for this role. I also think it's balancing your time and knowing these roles take a certain level of strategic thinking and time and just balancing out and not saying yes to too much. It's something you have to be able to balance. That's a challenge. I would say that probably the biggest thing is it gets a little lonely because you're your team, but that can happen really with any remote role.
Yes, absolutely. I know all about the working with my 2 chief dog officers.
Yeah.
That
They don't talk back.
oh yeah, mine are husky, so they talk.
They do.
Back.
They do.
They're very loud sometimes, but I guess that's better than some coworkers, arguably.
Yeah, nobody's bringing in like donuts. I'd have to go get the donuts or something like that.
So Jennifer, I think it's impossible to not talk about the rise of AI and all of the marketing tools that we're seeing that are every single day, they seem to be more and more in thousands powered by AI. So how do you see AI either enhancing or inhibiting the role of fractional CMO? And how do you see that role evolving? And do you think it's important to have AI knowledge or AI skills going forward in this role? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so it's something I'm watching. I know there's some people that are just embracing AI and trying it. And I think if you have projects that you can play with and test and be open, that's great. But if you were like pushing out new content and don't have time to catch its quirks, because there's quirks in it, then don't maybe do it, right? Or maybe pick projects to play with it. My personal opinion of it right now is it's still refining. It's still a baby. It's an infant. Content wise, all intelligence isn't fully intelligent yet, right? And heartfully, as a creative, and I know there's a ton of people that will echo the sentiment, is that part of our originality is what we bring in our natural born talent, and our brains want to write, and we write with emotion and love and passion for what we do. That I do not think today AI replaces that. AI doesn't have intelligence of the data. AI is not sitting in the room and hearing what's going on in the boardroom. AI does not know new product that you're talking about and how your brand may be affected by changes and what you're bringing to market. So AI right now scrapes what it sees online. It doesn't scrape what it could know that humans know. So that's where I very respectfully step back and say it's not there yet, because it's not in all of those conversations. But for quick and creative graphic design, we're seeing things like Canva. Everybody uses Canva, and it's always, I feel like that's like a version of pick and choose or make stuff better. And there's some quick fixes to use it from a graphic design standpoint. So that I think is awesome. I've heard some samples where it rewrote radio copy. I also am a proponent of radio still. It's one of those older topics, older marketing things I still do. And I heard an AI record it and I was like, it doesn't sound real. It sounds cold and not quite in a brand. So it's not there yet, but I would say play with it, be delicate with it, and be respectful of your peers that really are creating homegrown content, because you're stepping on toes when people come in and say, we can do AI can do this and marketing can go away. It's a delicate topic for people. Hopefully I answered all your question around that, but you may want to jump into more parts of it.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I think it is in its infancy stages, right? If we think about the internet, like I like to think about when the internet came out and people thought we could potentially do with it. And we didn't even understand how it really works and what the capabilities would be. And think about all the technology that kind of evolved from being connected, right? Like from Uber apps to DoorDash and everything else that we know today. And that's like part of Amazon, right? Like integral part of our life that we could have never dreamt that when the internet first made its appearance. So I think same thing with AI. We're so early in its development. Obviously, with the explosion of ChatGPT, it's made like a huge splash and everybody seems to know about it, but it is still in its infancy, but it is developing much faster. And I think one thing to be aware of is that it is that exponential technology that it will develop much faster than anything else we've seen. And if you guys been following AI, you see every single day there's new tools that are coming out that can do some really incredible things. But I do agree with you that right now it needs some supervision for sure from the human side. I personally use it every single day in my life, from my work to even what am I cooking today for dinner, trying new recipes and giving it ideas. I have these ingredients, what can I make? And it's pretty crazy the stuff that comes up with. So I personally love it and I love experimenting with it, but I've always been like the lover of technology. I think it's a great advice to keep an eye on it and try to play with it just to see what's possible, and because you certainly don't want to ignore it, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for efficiency in how we create some of our advertising and manage some of our tasks and things. So I definitely see there's opportunity there. And I'm talking about it just in the realm probably more of creative. And in my roles, clients are also saying, are you seeing where we can use AI? So I have to be watching it as well to see when we feel like something's evolving to make us better at what we do, so that we can maybe put brain power and manpower in other things that we know AI could take over. I just don't have that full list or recipe just yet.
Coming your way. So
yes.
So Jennifer, we're approaching September at the time of this recording. We're about midway through August. And we're starting to have those conversations about year-end budgeting and as well as planning for next year. We're starting that conversations around September. So first, let's talk a little bit about budgeting, because it can be such a tricky part of marketing, because marketing seems to be the first to be blamed and the first to get cut when something is not going right. So what's your take on year-end budget? Do you feel that most companies have some money left over? And what do you recommend? Is it better to spend that money before the year end so that you don't lose it type of a deal? Or what are you seeing when it comes to budgets at the end of the year?
Great question. Yeah, I typically start to go into planning season now, knowing that I would go through several iterations of the budget with my leadership team before we hit the end of the year. I always say August is a good time to start thinking about it and really evaluating and giving yourself time to do it right. So on the home building side, I can speak uniquely to them, where they won't have anything left over. Usually by now, there have been cuts once or twice, is very traditional in home building. So if you get through the year with extra money to play with that you use or lose, wow, kudos to you, because I haven't had that happen. But I would say, what could you be putting in then for your assets for next year? If you have bucket of funds that it is use it or lose it. What can you be putting in towards your technology, thinking through your community digital assets? So is there something you could create as far as an animation or some virtual model tours for some homes that you think are going to be maybe used in multiple markets that you don't have that asset? So really say, what could I create today I can use tomorrow that could maybe have legs in a couple of different markets or some longevity with communities. So always building towards innovation. Not enough marketing budgets have that percentage built in. I see a lot of how do we live in this year? There is a few frontrunner companies that always are innovating. And so that's absolutely part of their budget. So that's what I would say to that is start planning now. And if you have those funds, absolutely build it into innovation and those technology assets. And also see, is there anything digitally that you can push in the last part of the year, depending on where my sales are. I sometimes am very frugal in what I do, especially in December. Traditionally, I've worked across industries. I always see December as a go dark month on a lot of my advertising, just because there's so much noise. It's most expensive. And if you haven't sold it yet, you're not going to get it to the finish line. So I use more of my sales teams and more one-to-one to try to push anything we have to on the sales side and in home building specifically.
Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about when you're planning for that budget, keeping the long-term strategy to short-term tactics. And sometimes it seems like we can do a lot of marketing, but it's just like marketing for the sake of marketing, not necessarily tied to a big goal, especially if your goal is something like increasing brand's visibility. That can be very difficult to track ROI back to the campaigns. How do you balance that short-term versus long-term?
Yeah, I always recommend, or if I'm making the decision, I decide that I always am allocating at least 20% of my efforts. I'm not going to say that's 20% of the overall bucket, but I'm making sure we have a brand presence. You always have to be building your brand. Your brand is in market. Buyers are always wanting to buy. So your brand has to be out there consistently. And so always making sure I have that earmarked in the overall strategy. Now, community to community or master plan or product to product, that does change. So saying there's never any reactionary would be a lie, right? Especially in speaking specifically to home building. So I always try to earmark time, and you have to give stuff time. So I always say you have to try to give something 90 days to soak into the market and get the message across. Trying to do these 2-week or 30-day promotions or campaigns never are very fruitful, because if you're doing it, everybody's doing it. I always try to make recommendations. Hey, can we consolidate the message? Can we give it 90 days soak time in market? Remember, we have the brand presence out there. And you've got to remember that seasonally, I build my budgets around seasonality, knowing that there's very specific windows of time we should be advertising to get those leads in, to give them the nurturing time. And we can come back to them in some of the slower months, because not everybody's ready to buy today. But I don't think there's enough emphasis putting on what does that brand layer do for us long term? What does that innovation layer do for us long term? Everybody's squeezing in these reactionary budgets or adjustments to their marketing, when you really need to always have those other layers working for you behind the scenes, and then figuring out what that message is and what the timing of that message is. So those are things that I consider without looking at a very specific budget. I'm kind of talking holistically here. That's what I do to attack that. To always remember I've got some great brand for a master plan, or some great brand for a product brand, or great branding out there for active adult, because you have these segments of buyers that are long-term lookers, or they're looking for that buy for the next 2 or 3 years. So keep that brand out there. It's working for you behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. And it's almost like I wish, and I don't know if many companies do that. I'd love to hear your take on that, where we could separate the technology or innovation budget from the marketing budget, right? Because although yes, it is definitely helping you market the homes, right? But a lot of that technology is it can get pushed to the back burner, right? Okay, we need like immediate results. It's okay, we're going to take this marketing dollars and spend it on the ad campaigns or to generate the leads, and that tends to get pushed back. So what's your take on like keeping those budgets separate, or do you think it's together?
500%. I always look at where my ROI is based off direct advertising. Marketing, you've got overhead, you've got planning, innovation, and technology, and then you have direct advertising from the home builder side of the fence, so that you're only looking at your lead and your sales conversions based off what we're trying to drive. And that those are conversations. So if you're investing dollars in innovation and technology, your leadership needs to know and be committed to how those dollars are working for you and what's the purpose, so that they are, I want to say, they're put on a shelf in the fact that they're not part of what you're doing to drive sales and traffic, and knowing there's two different things. So I absolutely always remind people like, hey, branded mats, that's not driving advertising. Branded flags, it's the signage. But just knowing what things are part of your direct advertising strategy versus indirect is where you should be having the conversations on your ROI. I would always do that with product brands, and depending on how I would roll it up, I work really closely with all of our CFOs in the organizations that I've supported to say, hey, out of our complete market, here's our brand market budget, but here's what we're doing to use to grow our active adult brand, or here's what we're doing for our affordability line, or here's something we're doing very specifically for a different market, and have those pulled out so that when you go back to those conversations, you may have several different budget cylinders that you're talking to what those direct marketing budgets are for those very specific pushes. A strong marketer is very organized in their budget, very organized in their planning, and they know exactly what bucket of money they're doing to drive very specific tasks. And that's something I come in and help teams get organized with, is how to look at that budget really smart.
Love that. So yes, if you guys need some help planning for next year, you know who to call here. So Jennifer, I'd like to shift things up a little bit and talk about some trends. So marketing trends. Obviously, some trends have stood the test of time, and we've seen a lot of new trends emerging in the last few years with social media and reels and everything else that a direct-to-consumer commerce idea. So what are you seeing right now that is working for most home builders? Any new trends that you think more builders should embrace, or is there a cautionary tale about jumping on trends?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't see too many builders doing anything super outside of the box. I'm saying most. I always say the consumer is a consumer of all things. So I do champion watching what other industries are doing, watching what multifamily is doing. Multifamily watches what hospitality is doing, right? We're all in this like consumer pie, but we all look at different ways of being innovative depending on how the consumer digests our products or services. So I see, for example, one of my favorite people in building, Stephanie McCarty, I see her working with the Home Edit. And that'll be an interesting case study to see, does bringing in this brand that offers a different touch to lifestyle and how a home lives, and bringing that brand in to touch the Taylor Morrison brand, what does it do for sales? What does it do for customer experience? And what does it ultimately do for the brand long term? So I love that she's innovating, she's trying something new. And that's something we'll learn from, because a lot of people are absorbing content, social influence, ideas, inspiration from their phone. And so much of what something like the Home Edit or those other influencers in various spaces are coming from, how do we tie that into the home space? So I think there's more room for that, more room for influencers. That's an area that I've also personally wanted to dabble in and have had some conversations, is how do we bring in people that do something really well, like we see on HGTV, we see DIY, how do we bring those into those spaces? Because a lot of people get a little frozen on, how do I make my home more unique for me? But that's the aftermarket mentality. So I think as marketers, we want to be innovative into, how do we get our message out there? How do we create a unique experience? But we always fight with the traditional way of getting the home built, giving them the keys, and moving on to the next site. So that's where, as marketers, if we have a great idea, we need to bring those to the forefront. So some areas of innovation, I think they're still ripe for the taking, is how are we interacting with people from the traditional sales center. And I always say the trap fences are starting to come down. The consumer doesn't want to be trapped in this experience. And we've seen that happen. But then what is that experience to the home? Are there other things we can be doing with activation on apps? U-Tour is part of that. We've seen different things with robots being in the home, and people are not sure what they need with that because they're maybe not seeing those experiences used across the board. So I always say, when you try something, be aware of, as somebody else brought this to market in another customer experience, or are you just testing it because you want to see how it works? So I do think there's room in the sales center, this experience center, as I like to call it. And if we think about it less as a transaction place with a desk, a person, and a product, and more of how do we make it a more inviting environment, that's where we have the opportunity to start to innovate. And someone asked me the other day, like, not to go off topic, but why don't we innovate as an industry? And I think it's because we've never really had to. People need homes, we build homes, and it's such a rinse and repeat business that there's never had to be, in order for us to be successful, we have to do things different. Now, granted, there's different ways to be successful with supply and labor, natural resources that's moving the needle on product, but the way we sell, we've never really been forced to do it any different. And I think that's what holds us back. So as marketers, I think we have the opportunity to bring those creative ideas. I get more inspiration walking through a mall. If you look at my phone, my husband's, you have the most random pictures of stuff on your phone. Because I see signs, I see lights, I see experience. And I sometimes share those on LinkedIn because I'm like, look at how other brands are carrying on in their environment with their consumer. We don't have to be locked in one way in the home building industry. And our departments and marketing have the opportunity to make those changes. So go and find out what inspires you outside of your walls. I have fun with that.
I love everything that you just said. So going back to Taylor Morrison, I think, yeah, it's genius what they're doing. And if you guys haven't checked it out, I'll link to that so you can look at it. But it is something that we've definitely seen more of, like even like user-generated content and influencers in other industries. And we have been missing that Got Milk campaign for home building, right? There is not. Obviously, we have NHB, but traditionally they have been serving more of a builder community rather than going to the consumer community and showing why new home and all those things. A lot of that we are trying to do at Anewgo, and we've been experimenting with influencers and content creators, and that definitely resonates with me. And so I think for sure more builders need to start trying out some of those strategies, and especially when you think about kind of user-generated reviews, we see those reviews from home builders, but it is like in a crusty old format where it's two people sitting in front of a camera. I think, again, when it feels staged, which those reviews are staged, right? Like it doesn't feel as authentic. So I would encourage you guys to check out UGC content on Instagram, on TikTok. If you just do a hashtag UGC, you'll see a bunch of content come up. And a lot of it is going to be from beauty industry, right? Check out this lotion, check out this whatever I'm using. But it is consumers giving essentially free reviews, or usually they're not free, but it appears that it is free, and then they're just giving genuine feedback to the brands. So I would encourage you to look at some of these types of opportunities and how can you incorporate it into your brand, especially on social media, to appeal to the younger generation, millennials and Gen Z. They certainly appreciate more of that authentic, spontaneous, not staged type of content on social media, particularly. And I love that you say we should create more of an experience in our sales centers. So I love to hear some ideas. What have you seen people do differently in a sales center? Because you're right, it is such an opportunity. Like even if you go to a dealership sometimes, and certain dealerships are like, whoa, it's just so different. Or it can be something small that they're doing. So have you seen anything that was memorable for you that you can give us some examples of what type of experiences could we incorporate into our sales centers?
Yeah, there's different things that make a difference, right? So when you think about any experience that's memorable, what made it memorable? You walk in and it's how the space smells, right? That's the first. What was the smell? That's important. And I talked about the senses in brand. How does it feel? What's the lighting, right? Do I feel warm? Does it feel warm? Does it feel inviting? Does it feel cold? The temperature, the design, the interior design, another area that I work in. What's the aesthetic? How does it feel current? Does it feel on trend or does it feel very corporate? All of those things, your brain is tick, tick, tick. Do I feel like I'm in the right place? The minute you walk in, all of those affect it. Think about when you walk into the Ritz-Carlton or beautiful hotel, all of those things hit the senses and you've immediately connected with the brand. That happens with the sales office, people. Same thing, right? How intimidated, like new car dealership, when you walk in, nobody ever wants to, let's go inside first. No, because you know why you're there. You're there to be sold. So when you say an experience center versus a sales center, I'm here to have an experience with you first. When I'm ready, let's talk about what sales means. So before you pull out anything innovative, those are like the easy buttons that you can rethink. I think where the innovation is, how do I, again, connect the thing that barely leaves our homes, right? Barely leaves our hands. So how do I stay connected to an experience that I saw in the experience center? Am I getting information from different personas on a wall? Like maybe I don't want to hear about how a young millennial is liking this community, but I want to hear how someone who's got 2 teenagers is liking this community. And then maybe I want to join some other residents on a board that are talking about events, things coming up, mom brunches, things of that nature. And I want to get connected into that community. Is there an app that I can now connect with people that I haven't met and I'm going to meet? And then I feel less intimidated. Like those are just some ideas that I have. Health and wellness, like how are you activating your community? Even if you don't have a clubhouse, can you have somebody championing and rallying health and wellness in your community, going off site, using your trails and parks, things of that nature? Or is there some kind of an experience that then also goes into the home? This is an area I've been really passionate to figure out with the builder is bringing in some of these really cool screens that connect your home that can help monitor things of like with your health and your doctor appointments and your schedules and things that are integrated into the home. We're doing all these things with apps that connect your sprinklers and your garage doors and your electricity use, but there's like a whole part of lifestyle organization. Can that be brought into the home? And I think those things can be part of the experience center. What is our brand going to do for you? What is the community that we're going to foster going to do for you? That's going to, and then there's our product and how is our product being innovated? So when you're buying into the community, you're buying there first based off location. That's a hard fact. People think they're here because of my price point. They're not there because of your price point. They're here because of my exteriors and they love them. No, they're there for location. So selling to that location. And I think we can use technology and interaction and apps in a much more innovative way than I'm seeing. So I have toured Minto communities. They did a great job a few years ago when I was out there, bringing in some of the personas and more of a technology experience. Great use of colors and experience centers that my team of builders designed. Did it well in Park in Florida. It's just fun and creative and dynamic, and everything in there ties to the experience that you're going to get as you're walking through the various parts and parks of the community. So definitely have seen some great orchestrations, and people want that human element, but don't want to be sold to. They want experience. So yeah,
100%.
there's some more work to be done there.
That idea of tying senses into it, like you don't necessarily think about it, but you're so right. You know how you smell something and it triggers a memory, right? So that's an easy way to incorporate those senses into the experience. And I love, obviously, all things technology. So I think one thing we can learn is to be better at providing that experience, to showcase how the technology helps you live in the home, right? Like as you mentioned, we have the model home staged full of beautiful furniture and the decor because it shows you how you're going to live in the home. But what about all the smart technology that we now see so often used in a home? Are we actually showing it as we demonstrate in the home? Is it available? And do sales reps even know how to access that? Or is it like it was back in when I was selling, where we didn't know how to even turn on the whole house speaker system, and it was like more of a pain in the butt and so, and then who's going to buy that, right? If you're not showing it how easy it is to use, how easy it is, how it's going to help you enhance your experience in the home. So that's a great point and great idea to start finding ways. How can you showcase that during the visit to the model home? And obviously that's an easy upsell right there. So that's pretty expensive. So
and the last thing that I think is still a question is some builders will say, well, we're not going to spend X amount of money on an experience center. Sometimes those do make sense for larger communities or communities that are going to be in place for 3 or 4 years. So your expenses will definitely change. And we're looking at how much do people like self-tour versus someone on site. I think that's important. Doors need to be open. People need to be available. But people do have the flexibility to be touring after hours. So I think things like U-Tour and some of the touring applications out there are definitely should be part of your solution if you can. Because again, the buyer has different needs and wants and expectations. It's all about how we say we're changing them as an industry.
Yeah, I love that. And quickly, I know this is not the topic, but I wanted to see your take on the hub experience. I think more and more builders are starting to experiment with the idea of, okay, maybe I don't need a decorated model home for all of my communities. If I have 5 community cluster in this area, could I then create this experience hub where people can come in and tour maybe several models that are available within all of those communities? Do you see that?
Yeah, so I worked with a builder where we did a larger model parks, and people love them. As a marketer, I love them because it's much easier to draw people to 4 or 5 models. I get to see more stuff. It's like going in a store and saying, I only have 3 shirts for you to see here, but if you go across town, you can see 10, right? I'm going to need to see more variety. I don't know if that's a good example, but I do, as a marketer, I've loved marketing the model parks because there's just so much more to see, and it helps your buyer either daydream and say, wow, maybe today I can get this, but tomorrow I might get into this. You're already doing some pre-branding. You give them a great experience to grow with you. Ideally, as marketers and as home builders, we want customers for life that are going to come in at stage 1, love us, love our experience, love our product, feel like they bought quality and value, and grow with their families over the years. If we do that, I could be out of a job. It's not like I would have to market less because it's just people are coming back to us. So if every builder had that mentality, think of how much easier it would be for our brands to accomplish our goals. So I always stand by that.
Love that. So as we're wrapping things up, Jennifer, I'd love to hear, where do you get your inspiration? I know you mentioned that you have random stuff on your phone when you go through the mall, etc. But to stay current in your role, is there podcasts that you're listening to, books that you're reading? What are you following? Where do you get your information to make sure that you're staying relevant in this industry?
Yeah, I think more so I'm curious. So I connect, I've been growing my LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I am looking for people that are doing interesting things or thinking outside of the box and connect with them. I love to have lunch. I schedule lunches a couple every month just with other leaders and other industries to hear what's going on. Even if I don't fully know what's going on in their industry, just to hear. I keep a pulse on multifamily because I think multifamily and single family, obviously there's some synergies, some differences, and some things that are very similar. And then keeping on top of what's trending in retail and hospitality and watching those things. So I'm curious. I'm always digging in online and looking really outside of our industry, but then following people that I know are also watching across the gamut. So I could, after this, send a list. Every time I put on the spot, they're like, what are you reading? And I'm like, but I could send you a list of maybe some of the resources. But I always say, stay curious and don't stay in your lane with curiosity. Look outside of your network, look out and inside, but just always be growing and curious for outside of what we're seeing every day. Otherwise, we won't know what we know. So
I agree with you 100%. Stay curious and always learn something new. Every single day I try to learn something new, whether it's podcast. Guys, I'm addicted to listening to podcasts, and it's just so easy. You're doing dishes, whatever, you're putting laundry away, like, just have something to listen to. So Jennifer, last question for you. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today, or you think there's any misconceptions about the role of fractional CMO that people have, or anything you want to bring up that you think would be important to know for our listeners?
No, hopefully I explained the fractional CMO, or maybe demystified it a bit. There's a few people that are definitely stepping into the space, and I champion supporting my peers as everybody grows. I would just say on the marketing front, to tell everybody to just continue to remember that we're in a different time than we were back in the last recession. And I'm starting to just see some tendencies to rolling back the marketing archives. Like, we're not in a fire sale. We're not in a quick to put out these crazy incentives. At the end of the day, the buyer's smart. And you will devalue your brand if you try to do anything that doesn't really stay true to what you want to be known for. And buyers still always buy based off location and community. So how you can think about where you're building your communities and create sense of community is super important. And just really being true to your brand, because once one builder creates a fire sale or a crazy incentive, and then the next one does, and the next one does, we're all telling the buyer that maybe we're not trustworthy or we're not certain in various realms. Stay true to your brand and stay true to why you're in home building, and make sure that your marketing really resonates. That's my only fear and last bit of advice. Don't let it happen.
Love it. And Jennifer, if somebody wants to work with you, whether it's in a fractional CMO capacity or mentoring, how do they get in touch with you? Where can they find you online? Where do you hang out?
Yeah, so I am an active mentor with the HBA. So there's a page with the HBA of Denver, to be specific, with information on mentor opportunities. I think you can get on the list there. I do have an active one right now. You can go to my website, evolutionmarketingco.com, and connect to me there. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so drop a message or link in with me. Would love to expand my network and answer any further questions from listeners out there. Thank you so much, Anya, for having me and letting me explain this role, because many times I don't have an elevator pitch for what I do. I do, but it needs a little bit of explaining. So I appreciate that you dedicated time for this topic.
Yes, it was a topic that I was curious to know about myself, and I know our CEO is curious about it as well. And I thought, who better than Jennifer? So thank you so much for being on today, and for demystifying the role. I think hopefully more people are open to the idea, especially as marketing budgets shrink, and you may not necessarily need a full-time CMO or can't afford one. So that's definitely a great alternative to still be strategic in your marketing, but not necessarily cost you an arm and a leg at the same time. Thank you so much for being on today, and I'll see you very soon. What's the next thing that you're speaking at? Where can people see you in person?
You will find me at the Women in Residential Construction Summit in September in Nashville, and then the Tech Home Builder Summit in Phoenix in November. So,
Housing Transformation Summit, also known as Tech Home Builder Summit. So yeah, I think they've combined that. I will be there too. So I'm excited to see you. Unfortunately, I'll be visiting the Women in Residential Construction. I have a wedding that weekend, or that week. It's actually destination. So, but yes, I will see you in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. So if you guys want to find out about that one, I will definitely link to it. It's a great event.
That'd be great.
If you're a home builder, you can attend for free. They'll fly you in, they'll put you up in a hotel. It's a fabulous event. And I would highly recommend it if you want to learn all about technology, whether it's advertising and marketing technology, or if it's in-home technology, like a smart home technology, all in one place. It's a great event, definitely worth attending. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.